When you think it through, a lot of people are saying, well, you should only put stateless apps on Kubernetes, but eventually that data's got to get stored somewhere anyway. And what's changed is there's a lot of new apps that are coming out where there is no legacy environment to store data. So there's just Kubernetes and where it's going to sit in the first place.
Yeah, two things, right? We kind of see three types of apps running on the cloud. One is the cloud native apps, which truly implies that they were born in the cloud. And they've never been on-prem before. And all of their system of records are running in the cloud, right? And then there is the second type of app, which I consider is cloud migrated, which means that you've done a lift and shift of something that was running on-prem and now is running in the cloud, but not a whole lot of replatforming has happened. And then there is a third type of workload where I think you're seeing cloud transformed workloads, where you've now migrated it, but you're now seeing the bills come through and you realize that the architecture of the applications you're running on cloud is not really built to make the most of the cloud. And so you're transforming them to be able to leverage the most out of the cloud ecosystems that you're participating in. Kubernetes is playing a huge role in that front. And the second thing I would say is, when people are using Kubernetes, they're also very, very likely to be using cloud databases. I mean, your Kubernetes users aren't exactly running it on Oracle workloads, right? So they're not Exadata, they're not Oracle guys. They're trying to run NoSQL databases in RDS and so on. So I think from a backup perspective, we have to look at what Kubernetes brings in, but at the same time, it means you now have new adjacencies with respect to cloud databases, and we need to protect those as well.
As we go along, historically at least, data protection was handled usually by, a couple of people you just hired out of school. They were entry-level jobs, and it was their first job in IT. As we go forward, it feels like this is now becoming part of a larger DevOps workflow. It's becoming more programmable. So how much of this is automated within DevOps, and how much of this is going to still be somebody using a GUI to perform a task?
Yeah, great question. We do think there will be a huge shift to a new set of users that are running Kubernetes data protection, right? And I think it's because these are new set of users like DevOps engineers now being put in charge of infrastructure. These guys weren't running infrastructure in the past, but now the Kubernetes clusters and your cloud accounts are being managed by DevOps engineers. So I think there is certainly a shift in the user persona for who is doing data protection. But not all shifts are good, right? There is certainly a lot of goodness that comes from moving everything into one set of users that are, highly skilled. DevOps engineers are, not afraid of writing a script and stuff, but they don't come from the backup infrastructure world, which means you go to a DevOps engineer, ask them, hey, what is the golden rule of 3-2-1 backups? And you're more than likely to not know the answer at that point. So the way we see it, a lot of backups will be automated, but in terms of architecting your backups, a guide will be very, very useful. So a UI that allows you to define a policy and stick to an SLA. I think you will see a UI is very, very useful. And also, whenever you do restores, I think you're more likely to use a UI, and you wish there is a UI rather than having to go, play around with the YAML configuration file. But we certainly think it's a hybrid world. Backups will be more and more automated with DevOps engineers in charge. But I think they all wish we have a good UI to be able to do restores when they want to do restores, as well as to set policies.
Speaking of restores, it used to be when there was a restore, we would kind of say, all right, well, it's not going to show up for about 24 hours to 36 hours. And you would just basically send everybody home and call them back in when it was done. It feels like now there's a much more of a premium on the recovery side of this equation than as much as the backup side. So how is that changing? And how much time do people need to allow for recovery? Is it almost instantaneous? Where are we?
Yeah, I think the market is very circular in this aspect, right? I think we made a lot of progress with traditional workloads where instant recovery suddenly became the default state, right? If you lost something, in VMware ecosystem or virtualized ecosystem in general, you would almost always be able to bring that data up fairly quickly. I think with Kubernetes, we're taking a lot of step forward, but some things took a step back. One of them is being able to restore very quickly. Right? Even today, with the world of Kubernetes, if you're trying to do a restore of a Kubernetes cluster, you needed a functional working cluster before you could do a restore to it. I mean, imagine a world where in VMware, there was no bare metal recovery. In physical service, there's no bare metal recovery. So that's the same world we are in right now with Kubernetes. To do a restore to a new cluster, you need that cluster configured up and running, and you have to do all of that stuff up front. So I think to some extent, we're kind of back to a world where if you want to restore, you have to come back tomorrow. I'll have possibly something ready state. But that's also where I think we found a lot of opportunity in this ecosystem. In the Cloud Casa, which is our backup as a service, is announcing some features this week. And these features include automatic creation of clusters during restore. So you don't need to have something up and running by the time you kick off restores. I think this allows us to bring down the RTOs during restores. And also, cloud is not a free resource. I mean, back in the day, you would always be running standby clusters to do these types of restores. But I mean, who runs standby clusters in the cloud? You're going to be paying AWS a lot of money if you are to do that. So I think there is room for the backup and recovery to be better with Kubernetes. And we're certainly trying to make that shift by auto creation of clusters based on what was backed up, being able to spin them up on the fly without the need for standby clusters, and super excited to be bringing those into the market. But look, it's a lot of the same things we did for VMware and physical servers, but it is really good to be able to see that we're reinventing a lot of that for the world of Kubernetes, because we, again, need it, and it's time-tested need that we need to fulfill.
How automated can automated get? Are we going to start seeing AI take care of some of this for us, or what's next?
Yeah, look, I think there is going to be room for AI in terms of learning what is going on in your infrastructure. I think we probably aren't yet in a model where a lot of operations are going to be driven by AI. But time will certainly make that happen as well. But today, there's certainly room for a lot of AI and machine learning in your ecosystem. But that's more around learning what is going on and being able to make some intelligent actions. And a great example, and also something that we're adding to our platform, right? First of all, we're delivering this backup as a service for you, which means that we can kind of look across multiple users what is going on in terms of what adoption is going on, what kind of clusters are being backed up, what is the size of average persistent volume, and what templates are being used for doing application-aware backups. We can kind of see all of this and actually learn and provide our customers with better service by creating pre-built templates for certain popular applications. And that's how we did pre-built application support for MongoDB, Postgres, and MySQL, because these were seen as the most commonly used databases with our Kubernetes customer. The second part of it is in security. I think AI and ML has a huge role to play in a constantly evolving threat ecosystem. Right. I think in the world of Kubernetes, there are two things changing. One, I think the cyber attackers are constantly evolving their threat mechanisms. And two, I think the ecosystem itself is changing their best practices on a daily basis. Right. You attend 2 KubeCon conferences, you go through the security sessions, and there is often very conflicting advice from one KubeCon to another KubeCon. So a Kubernetes admin really has an information overload and needing to track various tools that do this processing, and also the development of best practices and a constant evolution of best practices. Again, this is a world where I think AI and ML can play a huge role. We can learn across multiple customers. We can anonymize our recommendations and apply that to certain customers. And again, we're super happy to be bringing those capabilities with our security scanning features for our backup service.
Right. But I guess as we go along, what we're saying is if we move to DevSecOps, we shouldn't just stop at the left-hand side of that equation. We need to move it all the way end to end and say, how are we going to kick off a backup in the event of a ransomware attack? And then how do we automate all that stuff? So it sounds like that's still early days, but that's the end goal.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think backups have always been seen as like your last line of defense. And it's the copy that you hope you never have to use, right? And people say that's backups are where the data goes to die. I think all of these are being challenged on a day-to-day basis. Backups are no longer just your active last line of defense. Backups are kind of becoming your borders for various ecosystem, which means you need to secure it. And you need to have a more coherent strategy in terms of detecting intrusion and exfiltration and protecting your backups, because again, backups are one of the first things that are being attacked these days by cyber attackers.
And a lot of people are using tools like yours for data management as well, right? They're moving stuff up in the cloud back and forth. They already have your tool. They're like, why do I need another one? So do you think people appreciate the convergence of DevOps and data ops and how all that's coming together just for the purpose of moving data, not just for backup?
Yeah, I kind of feel that convergence is one of those things. There is no ideal convergence ever, because that means innovation is stopped, right? I think we're always in a constant pursuit of convergence, but it's also because I think innovation is also going to be a constant thing in our ecosystem. So I think, as I said, we are in the essential service provider space. Backups are a must-have. And our job is to really follow where the data is going. If that data is going into the container ecosystem, that's our job to go ahead and protect that data set. If the data is going to the NoSQL database as a service ecosystem, that's our job to go protect those workloads. So I think we're very much following the trend of where the data is going, and that convergence is certainly going to be a constant pursuit as a service provider.
Yeah. And then finally, there's more data protection companies than I can count. And every time that there's a new era, new ones arrive, but the old ones never seem to go away. So I think per pound in this category, there's more vendors than almost any other category I can think of. What ultimately differentiates who in this space? Yeah,
great question. It is a very sticky business, which is why I think per pound, you're seeing more vendors out here in this market than in a lot of other spaces. It is a function of retention, and lots of regulations have only increased the amount of time you need to keep your data sets. So it's certainly a sticky business, and it's a great business to be in, because look, how many times have we built products that are nice to have? But backup is not one of those. Backup is certainly something that you must have in every ecosystem. But I think where you are going to see a difference between various vendors, the incumbents versus the new solution. One, I think there's a huge opportunity now with who is doing the backups. We talked about the persona of a backup user is changing. So that I think is a huge opportunity in this ecosystem for new players. So incumbent advantage is somewhat reduced when your user base is changing completely. And second, I think there is certainly a preference for everything to be delivered as a service. So what is your delivery model? If you are an established player today, guess what? You're still running agent backups. You're sending out agents. You're maintaining a backup infrastructure. You've got a backup team that cycles tapes every day. A new cloud native company doesn't have any of these assets. They don't even have a data center. They don't have a staff. All they've got is a Terraform template or an Ansible run book and a bunch of cloud accounts, right? I think we will have to shift a lot of our thinking to delivering that essential element of infrastructure as a service. And I think that's really the approach we are taking for delivering cloud native data protection. We've built products all our life, and all our we've been around in data protection for almost 20 years as a company, and we built lots of products along the way. But doing it as a service is not easy, but it is very rewarding because you get to be very close to your customers.
All right, great. Hey, Satya, thanks for being on the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike, for having me.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
All right, that wraps up today's Techstrong TV broadcast. Hope you enjoyed today's conversations. There are a lot of really good ones, so if you missed any of them, please do check it out on demand. Just a quick reminder, we've got a couple events coming up, folks. We've got a few virtual events happening very, very soon. One is on February 23rd. It is the IBM Automation Insights virtual event. And that one is, I believe it's a half-day event dedicated to automation and IBM's kind of their technology and their point of view. And they have both folks from inside and outside IBM speaking about it. But it is definitely one worth checking out. After that, we have the Sneak conference. This is Know Your Code, Open Source and Supply Chain Summit. This one is happening March 1st. Again, this is a virtual event, and it is another one that is very, very topical, very relevant, and very worth checking out. We also have, coming down the pike, some live events, including a series of what we call Techstrong Live. They're roadshows, for lack of a better word, but we are going to be having them around the country throughout the year. The first one is happening, I believe, March 29th in Atlanta. It's actually going to be a 2-day event. One day is going to be dedicated to DevOps and Cloud Native. The other is going to be dedicated to cybersecurity. And we'll have that format, as I said, throughout the year in various cities across the United States. You can take a look at the lineup of cities that we have planned, as well as all of the information for our virtual events and our live events, including the InnoTech events that are going to be happening in Austin and Dallas, I believe Houston, Washington, D.C. So lots coming down on our events calendar this year. So please do check it out. Just go to techstrongevents.com. You can see the full lineup of what we have planned and get some more information, register for the events. For the virtual events, you can check out the agendas, like I said, the cities for these Techstrong Live roadshow type events, so much more. So please do check out techstrongevents.com. Check them out, register. See it all. All right, that's it for me. I will be back on Monday with a brand new Techstrong TV broadcast. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, a great weekend. Please, if you're celebrating Valentine's Day, you're down to the wire, folks. You got to get those chocolates and roses this weekend because Monday is Valentine's Day. And I will see you then. So have a great weekend. Please, whatever you do, stay safe.